Chapter 10, Manufacturing Consent, The Art of the Wartime Lie. For 4 long years, the Great War devoured men, resources, and sanity on an unimaginable scale. Yet, for it to continue, for millions to volunteer or be conscripted, for women to work in toxic factories, and for civilians to endure unimaginable hardships, the public had to believe. They had to believe in the righteousness of their cause, the evil of their enemy, and the ultimate promise of victory. This was the big lie at its most profound, the systematic, unprecedented effort by governments to manufacture consent, transforming patriotism into unquestioning obedience through sophisticated propaganda and brutal suppression. Total war demanded total control, not just over bodies and resources, but over minds and narratives. The big lie machine, how governments forged national will. Never before had governments dedicated such immense resources to shaping public opinion. Propaganda became a science, a pervasive, big lie machine designed to forge a singular national will and mobilize every citizen for the war effort. Enemy at the gates, demonizing the foe with art and words. At the heart of all wartime propaganda was the relentless demonization of the enemy. The multifaceted complexity of international relations was reduced to stark, visceral caricatures. The Germans were portrayed as Huns, barbaric, uncivilized, and cruel, often depicted with spiked helmets, bloodthirsty expressions, and bayoneting innocent civilians. British and French propaganda frequently circulated lurid atrocity stories, some embellished, some fabricated, such as tales of German soldiers bayoneting Belgian babies, raping nuns, or crucifying Canadian prisoners. While often untrue, these stories serve to inflame hatred, justify violence, and solidify the moral righteousness of one's own side. Similarly, German propaganda depicted the British as hypocritical, greedy imperialists, and the French as vengeful and decadent. Slogans were sharp, memorable, and designed to evoke primal fear and fury. Posters depicted menacing figures looming over peaceful homes, urging citizens to take up arms or contribute financially. This constant barrage of dehumanizing imagery and rhetoric effectively stripped the enemy of their humanity, making it easier for soldiers to kill and for civilians to endure the sacrifices demanded of them. Call to arms, the emotional pledges of recruitment posters. Beyond demonizing the enemy, propaganda also played a crucial role in recruiting soldiers and galvanizing the home front. Recruitment posters were masterpieces of psychological appeal, employing emotional pledges, guilt, and national pride. Perhaps the most iconic example is the British "Your Country Needs You" poster, featuring Lord Kitchener's stern, pointing finger. It was a direct, personal appeal, designed to make every man feel individually responsible. The American equivalent, "I Want You for U.S. Army," with Uncle Sam's piercing gaze, carried the same weight. Other posters depicted soldiers bravely marching off, women admiring their sacrifices, or children asking, "Daddy, what did you do in the Great War?" These images tapped into deep-seated emotions of patriotism, masculinity, duty, and even shame, presenting military service not just as an option, but as a moral imperative. They promised adventure and glory, cleverly masking the grim reality of trench warfare with idealized visions of heroism and purpose. Songs of sacrifice, how music rallied the masses. Music, too, became a powerful tool in the arsenal of persuasion. Popular songs, often simple and catchy, helped to rally the masses, boost morale, and spread official messages. Patriotic anthems like "God Save the King" or "La Marseillaise" were sung with renewed fervor. More direct wartime songs, such as "It's a Long Way to Tipperary" for the British or "Over There" for the Americans, became instant hits. These songs celebrated the bravery of soldiers, romanticized the cause, and dismissed hardship with stoic humor. They provided a shared emotional experience, a collective rhythm that bound people together in the war effort. They were sung in pubs, in factories, and by soldiers marching to the front, weaving themselves into the fabric of daily life and becoming a subconscious reinforcement of the official narrative, making sacrifice seem both necessary and noble. The silver screen spin, early film and war messaging. The nascent medium of cinema, still in its infancy, quickly proved its power to captivate and influence. Governments rapidly recognized the potential of the silver screen to shape public opinion and disseminate war messaging to mass audiences. Early war films, often crude and melodramatic, depicted heroic soldiers, villainous enemies, and the righteousness of the national cause. Some combined staged scenes with actual combat footage, often edited to fit the narrative. Films like D.W. Griffith's Hearts of the World, 1918, though American-made, was supported by the British government to garner American sympathy. Governments produced newsreels, shown before feature films, that presented carefully curated, official, versions of events from the front, designed to maintain morale and suppress dissent. While not yet as sophisticated as later propaganda films, these early cinematic efforts marked the beginning of film's profound role in wartime public relations, establishing its capacity to project powerful, often manipulative, narratives to a captive audience. The gag order, silence and suppression on the home front. The big lie machine worked hand in hand with an equally pervasive apparatus of silence and suppression. To maintain absolute control over information and ensure national unity, governments clamped down fiercely on dissent, censoring news and monitoring their own populations. Controlled narratives, how newspapers became government mouthpieces. Newspapers, the primary source of information for most citizens, swiftly became effective government mouthpieces. Censorship was rampant and heavy-handed. News from the front was meticulously vetted, often sanitized, and sometimes outright fabricated to present an optimistic picture of progress and high morale. Casualty figures were downplayed, defeats minimized or ignored, and any negative news was either suppressed or spun into a positive light. Headlines were manipulated to inflame patriotism and justify further sacrifice. Editors were pressured, and journalists who dared to question the official narrative faced severe consequences. The grim realities of trench warfare, the scale of the losses, and the futility of many offensives were deliberately concealed from the public. This created a profound disconnect between the official narrative and the eventual, horrifying truth, a fundamental, big lie that eroded public trust and would later fuel bitter disillusionment. Crushing dissent, imprisonment, surveillance, and the stifling of truth. To ensure unwavering support, governments brutally crushed any form of dissent or perceived disloyalty. Surveillance became widespread, with intelligence agencies monitoring mail, telephone calls, and public gatherings. Anti-war activists, socialists, and pacifists were rounded up, arrested, and often imprisoned. Speaking out against the war could be deemed treasonous, leading to severe penalties. Conscientious objectors, those who refused military service on moral or religious grounds, faced immense societal condemnation, public humiliation, and often harsh imprisonment. Many were sent to military prisons, subjected to brutal conditions, and even faced the death penalty for refusing orders. Beyond those actively resisting, enemy aliens, citizens of opposing nations residing within allied countries, or vice versa, faced internment, discrimination, and even violence. This systematic stifling of truth and brutal suppression of individual liberty underscored the authoritarian undercurrents of total war, demonstrating how swiftly democratic freedoms could be sacrificed in the name of national security. Whispers of revolt, the seeds of opposition. Despite the pervasive propaganda and draconian suppression, the enormous strains of total war inevitably led to cracks in the edifice of national unity. Whispers of discontent grew into open defiance, culminating in acts of rebellion that signaled the crumbling of wartime resolve. The pacifists' plight, standing against the tide of war. In a society consumed by patriotic fervor and hatred for the enemy, the decision to stand against the tide of war required immense moral courage. Pacifists, often motivated by religious conviction or deeply held ethical beliefs, found themselves ostracized, ridiculed, and persecuted. Their plight was agonizing. Refusing to fight meant facing the scorn of their communities, the accusations of cowardice, and the wrath of the state. They were subjected to tribunals, often denying their sincerity, and then imprisoned, sometimes in solitary confinement, or forced into brutal labor. Despite the harsh treatment, these individuals represented a powerful moral counternarrative, a refusal to accept the big lie that war was the only solution. Their suffering highlighted the immense personal cost of upholding truth and conscience against a society unified in its violent pursuit of victory. Mutiny in the trenches, when soldiers refused to die for nothing. Even the fighting men themselves, the very engine of the war, eventually reached their breaking point. After years of relentless slaughter, futility, and broken promises, disillusionment festered, eventually erupting into open mutiny. The most famous example occurred in the French army in 1917. Following the disastrous and costly Nivelle offensive, which promised a breakthrough but delivered only immense casualties, widespread mutinies erupted among weary, demoralized French soldiers. Units refused to advance, though they often continued to hold their lines defensively. The mutinies were born not of cowardice, but of profound despair and a refusal to die in suicidal attacks for no discernible gain. While brutal repression followed, coupled with improved conditions and a new, more cautious leadership under General Philippe Pétain, the mutinies forced the French High Command to abandon large-scale offensive operations for months. Similar, though often smaller, acts of defiance occurred in other armies. In October 1918, the German naval mutiny at Kiel, sparked by sailors refusing a suicidal final offensive, directly contributed to the collapse of the German war effort and the November Revolution. These mutinies were stark evidence that even the big lie of endless patriotic sacrifice had a limit. The workers' fury, strikes and unrest as empires crumbled. On the home fronts, the immense economic strains, combined with growing war weariness and the exposure of governmental deceptions, fueled widespread discontent. As inflation soared, food became scarce, and working conditions remained brutal, industrial action and civil unrest became increasingly common, particularly in 1917 and 1918. Strikes for better wages, more food, and an end to the war erupted across Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, and Britain. In Russia, this discontent famously escalated into outright revolution. These acts of workers' fury were a direct challenge to the big lie that all citizens were equally united in the war effort. They demonstrated that the social contract was fraying, and that the sacrifice demanded by the state had become too great for many to bear. As empires crumbled under the weight of external pressure and internal dissent, the ultimate futility of the big lie to indefinitely control minds and lives became devastatingly apparent.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please don't forget to like, comment and share this video. Also don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon, so that you don't miss out the next video. For now, you can continue with the next video or can go through the complete playlist provided here.